Banerjee, you've explained over the last 20 minutes your objections to the farm laws. Dr. Arvind Panagariya has been listening to what you're saying. He will now respond to each of the points that you've made, and then we'll come back to you for a final counter. I want to go across to Dr. Panagariya on the first point that Abhijit Banerjee makes, that the timing is not right. The Indian economy in the first quarter of this fiscal collapsed and contracted by 24%. This is not the time when, for the largest occupation in our country, you change the way they function. People are fearful, they have anxieties. Reforms are a good idea, Arvind Panagariya. Abhijit Banerjee argues that the government got its timing wrong. Dr. Panagariya.
The timing of anything can be questioned, Rahul. Abhijit didn't mention labor law reforms, which were also done in fact, the same parliamentary session as the farm bills were brought in. Because there was no agitation on labor laws, we didn't hear him object to those reforms. But if you look at it, actually, labor law reforms were as big or bigger than the farm reforms. So that's one point. The second is that, look, this is a reform which has been underway at least since 2003. And the discussion started 2 or 3 years prior to that. Many of the states have been doing this. Most importantly, what are you doing here? You are not changing the status quo in any substantive way. APMC markets are there. They will remain there. And in fact, the central government cannot even remove the APMCs. This is done under the state laws. And so therefore, it is up to the state. So Punjab government can step in and assure, and certainly Punjab farmers or Haryana farmers do not think that their state governments are about to dismantle APMCs. So I just don't see that option that the farmer currently has still exists. It is additional options that is being introduced to the farmer.
So, but let's build further on the point that Dr. Banerjee made about the manner in which the reforms were brought. The lack of public consultation, the lack of announcement brought through a reform, inadequate parliamentary proceedings, not being sent to a standing committee, that is being questioned not just by Professor Banerjee, but by many who are apprehensive, not with the reforms per se, but the manner in which the government sought to push these through. Arvind Panagariya.
Yeah, I think this also is, a lot of this is after the fact, because there is a movement, we are questioning these things. Reforms, in fact, were brought in June through the ordinance. And what the bills have done is to convert the ordinance into laws. I don't think even Professor Banerjee at the time really spoke against these bills, said that timing is wrong, timing is bad. I doubt that there was that much of a discussion. But after the fact that there has been a movement that the farmers are agitating now very aggressively, this is a bit of an afterthought on it. But also, in terms of discussion, look back at the report number 62 of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Agriculture. This whole report is about agricultural marketing, APMC reforms, and it in fact goes at length saying that, look, the monopoly of the commission agents in these markets is very problematic. There's huge amount of corruption and so forth. So parliamentary committee, the standing committee itself, which has 31 members from all parties, itself has made this recommendation. And this is like we are talking about 2019 December. So it's not as though discussions were not happening. And as we all know, these reforms had been underway through the state instrumentality for quite a long time.
But sir, so, even in a country like China, which is authoritarian in its political system, when price controls were being done away with and state procurement was being reduced in the early 90s, they went province by province, district by district, going across states, showing proof of success in limited patches, giving farmers a taste of what their life would be when this reform was introduced, and then scaling it up across states and then through the country. Here, in the middle of a pandemic, we are pushing through radical sweeping reform. Could this have been done incrementally, winning over the confidence of the farmers before pushing this through nationally, sir?
Look, we can argue about this continuously without end. But the point is also, how long does the poor farmer has to wait to get justice? After all, through the state instrumentality, it has been tried for 17 years, and it has not happened fully. I mean, in some states it has happened. Progress is variable. I mean, Bihar is an example where full reform did actually happen.
And it didn't work out well. In a state like Bihar, while production and yield went up, the price that the farmer is earning and the income of the farmers actually has come down after 2006. So you mentioned Bihar as a case study for agricultural reforms where APMCs were done away with. Actual data suggests that the farmers in Bihar are worse off now than they were earlier. So that reform didn't go as per plan. If it failed in Bihar, it could fail elsewhere.
Not the data that I have seen. Not the data that I have seen. In fact, both Ashok Gulati and Ramesh Chandra will tell you that after the reform, in fact, the gap between the MSP and the market price in Bihar has declined from what used to be 30% before the reform to 20%. They say 15 to 20%, so I'm being conservative, saying 20% after the reform. And certainly the agricultural incomes in Bihar have not fallen, they have gone way up. In fact, this was a period during which agricultural growth in Bihar was one of the highest. So I'm not sure which data you're looking at, but the data that I've looked at certainly don't show what you're suggesting. So
can I just say, sir, that in Bihar, paddy is currently being sold at 900 to 1,000 rupees a quintal against the 1,868 price set by the center. So it's not as if after the APMC system was done away with, that farmers started getting better price for their yield. It is true that when the pack system came into play, the yields went up, production per hectare has gone up, but the price realization of the farmers as a fact hasn't gone up. It's still much lesser than the MSP that farmers in Punjab and Haryana benefit from. In fact, there are instances where people take truckloads of paddy from Bihar, bring it to a mandi in Punjab and sell it because they get a better price here.
No, of course, anybody who can bring this to Punjab will want it because that's the MSP. That only says that the MSP is higher than the market price. Also, the numbers you have quoted are only for one current year. You have to look at what the numbers were before the APMC reform and what the numbers are after the APMC reform. Nobody disputes that the MSP is higher, significantly higher than the market price. I myself said that even after the APMC reform in Bihar, there is a 20% gap. This is the average gap that these gentlemen have computed. I mean, I haven't done these numbers. I just rely on Ashok Gulati and Ramesh Chand. Both of them have written about it or given interviews on it, and that is their numbers. But you've got to do before and after. I mean, you can't just quote, at a point in time, the gap between the MSP and the market
No, but
price.
it's stopped 2005 to now is about 15 years. So it's correct that wheat production has gone up from 1379 per kg per hectare to 2797 kg per hectare. In the same way, paddy production's gone up, maize production's gone up substantially. So net, between 2011 to 2018-19, India's growth rate for agriculture was 7.5%, agricultural productivity, but in Bihar it was 13.3%. So that is correct. The problem is that the price realization for farmers is not increasing. There is still a huge gap, which is why Abhijeet Banerjee argues that why should the price risk fall on the shoulders of the poorest person in the whole chain, the farmer?
Rahul, you got to look at it before APMC reform and after APMC reform. Has the risk increased or decreased? What I'm telling you is that because the risk has actually decreased, going by the numbers that I have seen from Ramesh Chand and Ashok Gulati, I would say that APMC reform made the farmers better off, not worse off. That is all limited point. It's not, it's nobody's case that MSP is lower than the market price. Of course, market price was lower than the MSP and it remains lower than the MSP.
So let's deal with Professor Banerjee's point about safeguards, about risk. In this uncertain occupation, why should the burden of risk lie on the farmer? Professor Banerjee's argument was that there should be a cost plus X% formula, not necessarily linked to international prices, could be domestic cost plus a certain percentage. Why is it irrational for the government to give the farmer some guarantee of price support?
Look, Professor Banerjee first started talking about MSP reform of MSP itself, saying that, look, how long are we going to do this? Can we keep subsidizing this forever? But then he wants to actually introduce yet another system in which the government guarantees the cost plus, meaning guarantees MSP to everybody. Already you got 90 million tons in your food stocks. How much more can the government collect? And we know it that if you give MSP on the entire crop, then all of it will have to be bought by the government. You'll not find too many market purchasers of it. And mind you, you are not raising risk any further by the reform. I mean, you keep saying that, why are you raising the risk? You are not raising the risk because the APMC is there. The old system that existed is there. Why do you keep assuming?
But is it? But is it? Because in the manner in which the original, allow me to contest what you're saying. In the manner in which the original 3 bills have been got, the taxes and levies applicable on government mandis continue, while procurement from the private operators is bereft of any tax and levy. Now the government in an amendment is promising to change that, but the original intent of the bill was that private procurement will be bereft of any fee and levy. Government